Anglestan, Janus 17, 1923, AV. New Lundun. Henry. He felt a shiver run up his spine, his hand shaking as the stranger took it. It took all his strength not to jerk it away in an instant, shaking slightly. The stranger pulled themselves up and dusted their clothes. They adjusted their hood and glanced at Henry. He looked away, avoiding their eyes, catching only a glimpse of those red pupils staring at him.
"I'm very sorry. I was trying to catch the tram,"
he said, keeping his gaze on the ground. The stranger tilted their head to the side. They nodded and extended their hand toward Henry.
"No harm done. Be careful next time, yeah?"
A feminine voice spoke softly, slightly muffled by the mask they wore.
"I was going to take a tram back home too. Why don't we go together?"
"Oh, I wouldn't want to bother you, sir. Miss, sorry."
The stranger giggled through their mask and shook their head.
"It's Miss. I'm Olivia, and please, I insist. Besides, the tram left already, so we'd have to wait for a new one,"
she replied, offering a hand to shake. Henry paused for a bit, still staring at the floor. Surely it would have been rude of him to reject her kindness, right after he had crashed into her and made them both miss the tram. He quickly berated himself in his thoughts and turned to Olivia. He looked her in the face as he took her hand and shook it. His eyes couldn't avoid staring back at hers, a deep, bright red that almost shone. Her mask covered most of her face, engulfing half of her nose, reaching all the way down to her chin, a few strands of dark brown hair escaping the darkness of the hood she wore.
"And you are?"
she said, pulling her hand away.
"Henry, nice to meet you, Miss Olivia."
"Likewise."
Henry let out a nervous laugh, shoving his hands into his pockets.
"I would hardly consider a stranger smashing into you and making you miss the tram a nice meeting. Thank you for your kindness, though," he said.
"Oh, nonsense. You apologized already. Besides, you look terrified. Steel yourself. I don't bite often."
She chuckled, starting to walk towards the station. Henry followed beside her, nodding.
"Sorry. It's just that I rarely see, duskwalkers in New London,"
he said, as they reached the tram station. They stood by and waited for the next tram to pass. It would probably be a few minutes before the next one came around. Olivia nodded and let out a long sigh.
"I do suppose that's true. I'm a Londoner too, though. Technically, Dante is still part of Lundun, just a few dozen meters underground."
"I, didn't mean it that way. Sorry."
"No, I understand. That's valid. You've seen other duskwalkers before, though? I find it strange how you people call us that. We might not be sun kids, but we're just like you all the same."
She chuckled.
"Sorry."
"Oh, come on, don't be too serious. I'm just speaking my mind here."
Henry cleared his throat and tugged on his coat.
"Right. Apologies. It's just that this is a little more spontaneous than how my day usually goes."
He let out a soft laugh.
"Well, I guess a little shake-up in the old routine isn't too bad. To answer your question, though, yes. I've seen other, duskwalkers. Forgive the term. That's just what people call you guys. I know no better. But yes, I've seen maybe one or two in my life. From afar, though. I've never really spoken to one before today."
"Well, it's your lucky day, Henry."
"I suppose it is."
"Well, you're talking to a duskwalker. Aren't you curious? Come now, I'll humor any of your questions. Correct the misinformation and all that, yeah?"
Henry let out a sigh.
"Well,
He shoved his fidgeting hands into his pockets and turned his head up to the sky.
is it true that you need, you know, to survive?"
"I think you already know the answer to that."
"Right. Sorry. I just don't know what to ask, really."
"Nothing that piques your interest?"
"Well, what are those masks for?"
"Protection?"
"From us?"
"No, for you."
Oh.
Olivia let out a soft laugh.
"Well, it's not that I want to hurt you or anything. It's one of the prohibitions New London requires us to follow. Firstly, a lot of people don't take the presence of fangs well when we smile or laugh. A glimpse of them is enough to send most running, and judging by the look in your eyes when you saw my armband, you would have done the same too.
Henry opened his mouth to speak, but Olivia waved her hand, stopping him.
Totally understand. Let me just stop you there before you start apologizing again. The second reason is that some of us could not resist the hunger. They just go completely feral.
Yeah, I've heard some reports.
Henry replied.
Why does that happen? I thought duskwalkers should be immune to it and all.
True, but it's hard-coded in our biology to do so. Strigoi are strigoi. Hard not to resist sometimes, you know? Can't blame others for giving in.
She explained.
So we have these masks by requirement of the law whenever we surface. It blocks out sense and hides our mouth parts. 2 problems solved.
Henry pondered for a bit, focusing on her words. Truly, they weren't deliberately trying to hurt anyone. They're just people who have been forced into a difficult situation because of who they are. That doesn't mean they're something to be feared, right? Still, wolves are wolves, lions are lions, and strigoi are strigoi. Sometimes understanding something does not make them any less dangerous. Still, it goes without saying that they do deserve some respect. They're just trying to live their lives, same as anyone.
Have you ever left the city? New Lundun, I mean?
Henry asked. Olivia lifted a brow and looked at him.
I mean,
He said,
Anglestan isn't a big country. At all. And sure, New London is the biggest chunk of it. But there are surely other cities out there. And other countries, too. Have you ever visited them?
Not really.
Oh, I just thought, being functionally immortal and all.
Ah, well, I'm not that old yet. I'm just in my 50s. Trueborn.
Really? You don't look a day old, 25.
Flattery now?
Olivia chuckled.
Sorry, I didn't mean it that way.
No, please continue. I could deal with hearing more.
Henry couldn't help but laugh, his fear earlier, now fading away. He gave her a warm smile and a nod.
Well, if you are a Trueborn as you say, if I recall, that would mean you weren't turned in anyway. You were just born a strigoi. Right?
Exactly. Been this way since birth.
That's interesting. Aren't Trueborn rare?
A bit. Trueborns are only one in 500? Most strigoi are impotent, but there are the rare cases that result in Trueborns. We're a big deal since we're basically an anomaly, but studies on it declare that it's nothing special really. It's just both of your parents need to have that genetic lottery of having their baby-making bits unaltered when turned. Or one or both of your parents are Trueborn too. Chances are higher that way.
I never knew that.
Henry said. Olivia nodded at him, shoving her gloved hands into her pockets.
Well, glad I could be of help. Any other inquiries?
She asked. Just then, a tram in the distance started ringing its bell, announcing its arrival.
Oh, it looks like our ride is here.
It does seem so. One more question, though, Miss Olivia. If I may?
Henry said.
Sky's the limit.
Right. Well, what exactly are you doing here, though? I assume you live in Dante as you mentioned it before. Is there any particular reason for hanging out on the surface of New Lundun?
I'm one of the few who work here.
Henry raised a brow.
But I thought Dante was more accommodating to duskwalkers than New London. Why find work here? And not to judge or anything, but surely people here aren't as nice to strigoi.
True, but I need the job. Not many opportunities in Dante, you know.
What do you do?
Study.
What does that mean exactly?
I am, used as a study for a university. They take samples of me, test various materials on it, study my anatomy, biology, and everything in between.
Henry frowned a bit, turning to look at her.
Isn't that a bit dehumanizing? You're literally just being used as a test subject. Why do you let them do that?
Olivia tilted her head and gave him a deep stare before turning to look back at the road, the tram stopping just in front of them.
We should get on first before I answer that,
she said. The two of them stepped aside and waited for some of the passengers to exit the tram. As soon as everyone who needed to get off did so, They stepped inside and took their seats. Olivia sighed as soon as she sat down. She cleared her throat and looked back toward Henry.
Well,
She started.
I'm not exactly human, so that's out of the question on human ethics. Yes, it does sound horrible. Still, it's a far cry from what many experience in Dante. Opportunities are just better here, and so is the pay. Besides, they treat me well and the staff is quite friendly. Sometimes I get invited to classrooms for presentations.
Presentation?
Students get to see a strigoi in the flesh.
Olivia said.
See my fangs, my eyes, my ears.
I see. It doesn't bother you, though?
Not at all. Besides, if I felt bothered in any way, I'd resign immediately.
I guess there's that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going home for the day?
That's right. I'll come back to work by dusk. You know, duskwalker things.
Henry tried to hold back a chuckle but failed, covering his mouth. Olivia joined in, softly laughing. Just then a bell rang as the tram started to slow. The next stop was coming up ahead. Henry looked out the window to confirm it before clearing his throat.
Well, it seems that my stop is just up ahead.
Right. Well,
Olivia tilted her head towards him.
if you ever have time, why don't you come visit Astra Universalis College? Some classes are open to the public. It really has been nice talking to someone without them screaming first.
She giggled.
Well, I guess that works. I'll make sure to stop by when I'm able.
The tram stopped as soon as it reached the station, opening its doors. Forlornson Station. The driver's voice echoed out of the speaker. Henry stood up and headed for the exit, only pausing halfway to wave goodbye.
Glad to have met you, Miss Olivia.
He smiled politely.
Likewise, Sir Henry.
Henry stepped off of the tram before walking to his workplace. It wasn't too far, most probably a minute or two of light walking before he got there. The Notterbriggs foundry, smelting metal and shoveling coal into blazing hot furnaces. It was one of the few jobs he could take on without any formal education. It wasn't too difficult, certainly tiring to the body, moving heavy metals and melting them down with industrial machinery. The newly made steel would then be shipped out to other factories to be turned into whatever was needed. Weapons, walkers, foundations, and some more delicate machinery. All that work would usually leave him with aches and pains across his back and shoulders, but he could hack it. Besides, it was good exercise, and it wasn't like he planned to stay there his whole life. He was saving enough to enroll himself at a university where he could at least learn a specialization. He would need it if he was going to support 2 new children at his home soon. It would take some time. A good specialization course would normally take around 4-6 years. It was going to be a hard route, but he was driven. He didn't know what to take yet, though he was very sure there was something out there for him, something that piques his interest. For now, he'd have to make do. He walked the same old route to the foundry, turning a corner and walking by the sidewalk to get to the front entrance. As soon as he did so, his face was immediately struck by the hot air and dark fumes coming from the furnaces. He shook his head in an attempt to disperse the heat, which clearly didn't work.
Oi, Henry. Could use an extra hand here.
A voice called out to him as he entered.
Shoveling duty? Nah, I got metal moving to do, Vance.
Henry replied, slipping on an old dirty apron that probably was never washed in the entirety of its existence. He waved at the man digging into the coal pile and tossing it into the large industrial furnace. The fire screamed as the heat increased, blowing out flames.
Come on now, bruv. Just a little help never killed a man,
Vance said, tossing another shovel of coal into the mouth of the furnace, keeping it burning bright. Henry shook his head and let out a chuckle.
You'd be surprised by how wrong that statement is. All right, hand me a shovel.
Attaboy. There's the goody two-shoes I know and love.
You better take me to dinner after.
Oi, now bruv, you're a nice guy, but I don't swing that way.
Vance tossed him a shovel. Henry let out a laugh as he caught it. He shook his head, striking the coal pile.
I don't swing that way either.
He snickered, wiggling his eyebrows.
But I had you worried for a second, didn't I?
Vance blinked, and let out a snicker as well, taking a break from his coal pile.
Your mum must be proud of ye.
Not as much as yours. She really enjoyed last night.
Aight, I draw the line at jokes about my mum. That's tasteless.
Right, sorry.
Henry laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his head.
Unlike your mum? Ambrosia?
Henry chuckled.
Nice try, Vance, but you'd have to dig her up first.
He said.
Good Lord Henry. I'm sorry. I didn't know.
Vance's eyes widened, putting his hands up in front of him.
You never really told me about your parents, you know? I just assumed they were still there.
Henry let out a sad sigh and tossed a shovel of coal into the furnace.
It's all right,
he said.
I was still young back then. Had my brother to take care of, but ever since he died, I kind of just forgot about everything and moved on with life. Nothing else I could do, you know.
Vance frowned a bit, scrunching up his forehead and walking closer. He slammed a heavy hand on the poor lad's shoulder, making him drop his shovel in surprise.
Oi, if you ever need to talk, we're mates here, brothers of the forge, yeah?
He patted Henry on the back before nodding to himself, having helped a friend.
We look out for each other here. None of that keeping shite inside, right? That'll kill you.
Thanks, I guess.
Anytime, bruv. Now, how about we finish up this pile and get you moving some heavy metal, yeah?
The gruff man said with a wide smile. Henry let out a soft chuckle.
Yeah, let's do that.
Work got finished faster with the two of them, though Vance was doing more than half of the actual shoveling. He was a bigger man, a taller, buffer. He was significantly older than Henry was, 6 years to be exact, acting as a sort of older brother figure. He sported a peach fuzz just under his chin, as well as a heavy brow. He had worked the longest in the foundry, having spent 10 years of his life shoveling coal into furnaces, keeping them burning hot, carrying newly made metal rods and bars to delivery trucks and walkers. It had become a well-practiced routine for him. Every rumble of coal, every scream of the furnace, even the smell of smoke and fumes. It was home to him. Henry, on the other hand, while a good and hard-working man, never got used to working at the foundry. He had been there a little over 2 years, but every day felt like his first day. The heat on his face, the smoke in his lungs, the soot and carbon staining his hands. It was always a stranger to him, despite his muscle memory of nearly every task. He didn't exactly hate working there, but it was something he could never get used to, something that never stuck with him. It was something he never genuinely liked doing, but did anyway. After all, necessity sometimes calls for the sacrifice of comfort. Time ran quickly as they did the work, joints popping from time to time as they heaved coal into furnaces and moved steel bars. Before they knew it, dusk had set upon them. Henry let out a long, dragged-out sigh. His shift was nearly done. He took off his shirt for the 5th time and slapped it on his back, wiping off the heavy beads of sweat.
You going overtime again, Vance?
He asked, wiping his forehead.
As usual. You off to see the kids?
I haven't adopted them yet.
Nonsense. With how they see you, might as well be their dad already.
Well, I'm working to make it official. Those two are going to be a handful.
True, but they'll be a joy.
Vance chuckled before suddenly turning to Henry and shooting him a glare.
You better make me uncle, or I ain't covering for your missed shift, you bastard,
he said. Henry laughed, nodding.
You bet on it. Who else would I ask? Big John?
Oi, why'd I hear my name down there?
A large, burly man with a thick beard and a belly bigger than a boulder called out from one of the catwalks.
Nothing, Big John, just some locker room talk, if you get what I mean,
Vance replied.
You better not be insulting me behind my back.
Henry laughed and called out as well.
Wouldn't even dream of it, Big John.
Just then, the bell rang. Almost automatically, some of the workers slung their shirts on their backs and went straight for the exit, packing up their lunches and hanging up their aprons. Henry nodded and put his shirt back on instead. It wasn't illegal to walk around the city without a shirt, or completely nude for that matter, but it was surely indecent.
Well, another hard day's work. See you, Vance.
He said, heading for the exit.
Have a good night, Henry.
Vance called, waving his hand at him. Vance watched as his coworker left the factory, and new ones walked inside. As soon as he was out of sight, he grabbed the shovel and continued his work. Henry walked back to the tram station and waited for the next one to come by. He was a little late, but he could still play with the kids for a bit. They were probably waiting for him by the orphanage gate, at least Camilla would be. Her brother would have been too busy playing with the others. For siblings, those two were not at all alike, but he thought the dynamic to be quite funny at times. He would often tease the two about each other's little quirks, but in a fun, nurturing way. He wouldn't want them to change one bit. They both reminded him of his younger brother, George. He was a little bit like Camilla, clingy and playful with the right people, completely quiet and reserved with unfamiliar ones. He did have a spark of friendliness from time to time, much like Camilla's brother Jeremy. He would like to climb the old tree by their house and pretend to be a lookout on a ship, putting his hands over his brows and calling port and starboard, whatever he meant by that. Henry didn't understand him sometimes. He was a strange one, but he loved him completely either way. It was a tragedy that he died too young. The sickness took him. No one really understood how one got the sickness. It seemed to target individuals at random, without a pattern of infection, taking even those that looked and lived healthily their entire lives, as well as those who completely neglected their bodies. Rich or poor, old or young, clean or dirty, it was like death knocking upon their doors to claim indiscriminately. Henry had once prayed for it to take him as well, several times. Though, try as he might, he never caught it. It didn't make sense. All logic would suggest that being close to an infected person would cause it to spread, or being related to someone who contracted it would be more susceptible as well. Still, nothing happened to him. It took a while, but eventually he had to move on. It was the only thing he could do. Any longer in the dark place would have caused him to go completely mad. Give praise, he was still needed by the greater universe for something. Something greater, perhaps. Perhaps not. But looking at himself now, maybe this was the purpose he was still needed for. He was to take care of two young children who badly needed someone to give them strength, and he knew he had enough strength to give. The tram was taking much longer than expected. It usually wasn't this late. He checked his watch and saw that he had been waiting for over 10 minutes. The sky was getting darker by the minute, too. He tried to keep himself from worrying, but something felt really wrong for some reason. It was a twisting sensation deep in his gut, as beads of sweat started to form on his temples. The hair at the back of his neck stood up, and felt a chill run up his spine, making him shiver. He looked around him, already taking a stance, ready to take off into a full sprint at a moment's notice, but he didn't see anything. Nothing looked out of place, except for the fact that it was a little quiet. Some people were just walking around minding their own business. Though, more and more of them stopped in their tracks and looked up at the sky. Soon, more and more seemed to follow. It wasn't until Henry looked up at the sky did he notice something peculiar. Somewhere in the distance, probably just a few kilometers from his position, were large shapes just below the clouds. Large, round, elongated shapes surfing across the sky. They were approaching fast, too fast. He took a step back, squinting his eyes at the figures. He knew what they were, but the horror only set in once he was sure. The black banners they were sporting became much clearer now. Some people started to run, while others seemed too stunned to even move. They all knew what it was and what it meant. Those were Skyships and Dreadnought class, Strigs. They were invading.
Hey everyone, hope you loved the video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe for more awesome sci-fi content. You can also support us by hitting the thanks button at the bottom of the video. Your generosity goes a long way. Every bit helps us bring you more stories from the stars. Thanks a bunch.